Today's show is sponsored by SeatGeek. Buying tickets for sports and concerts used to be a confusing process, but SeatGeek have come along, created an amazing app and website that makes it easier than ever for fans to buy and sell tickets.
Yes, indeed. SeatGeek does all the price comparison for you by searching multiple ticket sites and ensuring that you get the best possible deal.
So when I open up my SeatGeek app, guess what I've been looking for?
What you been looking for?
US national soccer team versus Serbia.
Seems logical.
Tickets are available via SeatGeek if you want to go and see Bruce Arena's second inaugural game.
There it is.
As US men's national team coach at Qualcomm Stadium in San Jose.
I'm concerned. Are you looking this up because you're planning to go to California without letting me know?
Hey, if you come in the office one day and I'm not here, then you'll know why.
Okay, that's troubling, but all right. Well, I'm sticking closer to home. I was looking up tickets to Atmosphere with Brother Ali, both hip-hop groups that I enjoy very much, or hip-hop acts that I enjoy very much.
You mentioned this a week ago.
I did.
Yeah?
Still looking. Haven't decided if I'm going to go or not. Kind of want to. Been listening to more Brother Ali of late.
Well, okay, so I don't know about either of these guys, because I mentioned Run the Jewels. I found Run the Jewels tickets on SeatGeek the other day. Is it a comparable kind of sound?
No, I wouldn't say so. I mean, Atmosphere is a little all over the place. It depends on, I feel like, what Ant, the producer, has been listening to that, like, any given day informs what beats they're going to be utilizing.
Okay, I will maybe do some listening after we're done recording.
Yeah,
the good news is listeners can get a $20 rebate off their first SeatGeek purchase. To do that, to get a $20 rebate, you download the SeatGeek app. You go to the Settings tab, you click Add a Promo Code, you enter promo code TSS. SeatGeek will then send you $20 off after you've made your first ticket purchase.
Those are the 4 steps. Download the SeatGeek app and enter the promo code TSS today.
Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. I am Daryl Grove and I'm joined by a man who has just assembled his coaching staff. It's Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello, buddy. How you doing?
Pretty good.
I have assembled my coaching staff and it's everyone that I've been employing previously for the past 5 years.
So this is Bruce Arena. It's been announced what his US national team coaching staff will be.
Yep.
I have the names in front of me from the US Soccer press release. Dave Saracen, who is his associate head coach at the LA Galaxy, which is an interesting title, right? It sort of means you're more than an assistant, but you're not. You haven't quite got my job.
Assistant to the regional manager.
Pat Noonan, who from a long MLS career. Kenny Arena, sounds familiar. Who does, to be fair, does have his A license. He's a proper coach. And Matt Reese, remember Matt Reese, the goalkeeper? He's replacing, I assume, Chris Woods, who was the goalkeeping coach under Klinsmann.
And we're giving this significant airtime because we're still waiting for the U.S. roster to drop, the January roster. And I just want to say thank you to U.S. Soccer for releasing it. I can only assume in the middle of us recording this show.
I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. It is 4 o'clock Eastern time. That seems like it wouldn't be the best time for them to release it at, I'm guessing, 1 p.m. their time, or I guess they are operating on the East Coast. So who knows? But we'll see what happens.
When it is announced, we'll have a show discussing those names. Yes. One other name, Thomas Rongen, was named a couple of days earlier as Chief Head Scout, which kind of sounds like my dream job.
Yeah.
Right?
Travel around the world and talk to people about playing soccer?
Yeah, and not responsible for results, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's true. Although I guess if you suddenly stop getting any dual nationals declaring to play for the United States, maybe there's a link there.
Yeah, so not to go too much in depth on this, but there is the background to this is that Thomas Rongen, when he was the U20 coach, he started something that's referred to as the list, capital T, capital L. Which
sounds
is
sinister, but isn't really.
It sounds a little sinister. But any possible player that could have American citizenship that is sort of non-US based, like non-obvious US possible players. And this list, the list, has apparently still been referred to even in Rongen's absence. It's been a little bit updated. I'm sure the previous regime took a good long look at it now and again. So now Rongen's back in charge of the list and back scouting around Europe looking for dual nationals.
Is his list just a direct cell phone link to Brian Sciaretta? Do you think that's what it is? Because that's what I think it is. Brian, I need a player. Give me any name. From
what I read, there's a really good Hello Magazine story. Maybe I'll link to it in the show notes here.
Maybe you will.
That essentially, it's like Rongen started the list, but it's one of those things where once you put it out there, then when people know you're out there doing it, stuff starts to come your way, right? So your tentacles go out there, things come back. Information gets absorbed.
All that said, though, Thomas, if you need updates on young players from around the world, the TSS Scouting Network has you covered. More on that later.
Later on today's show. First up on today's show, we have 3 listener questions, handpicked in that we used our fingers to type into the computer to read them. You want to get straight to them, Taylor?
Sure.
All right, first up is from Scott Glatch. Scott Glatch would like to know.
By the way, good job there. I heard you researching the pronunciation earlier, so I think you got it right.
I got it right.
Well done, Mr. Grove.
Scott, if I didn't get it right, please let me know. We will apologise in the future, I guess.
Sure.
Scott wants to know, would penalty shootouts be better if, instead of being 12 yards out, like regular PKs, the kick was taken from farther away, like maybe 18 or 21 yards out?
Yeah. And I liked his idea, amongst other ideas he had in this email, that it was like basically from 12 yards out, it's sort of, you can't really react to it. That your goalkeeper has to kind of guess, so there's some head games going on. Whereas you move it further back, then it becomes more like a free kick where the goalkeeper has to react to it, has time to react to the shot.
We've analysed, I want to say 4 or 5 penalty shootouts last year, right, on the show. Yeah. And it was always became about like goalkeepers eventually figuring out which side someone's going, or goalkeepers doing the fake lean one way, then dive the other way. It becomes basically a head game and not so much sort of technique or athletic skills game. Which, not to say that PK shootouts are necessarily bad, but Scott's asking, would it be better if it was someone stepping up to strike the ball from, let's say, 18 yards, top of the area?
I think it depends on what you mean by better. Would it be more dramatic because it's less automatic? Then yes, I think so.
Or would it be fairer? Would it be sort of a more of a test of skill as opposed to something of a coin toss or a lottery?
Well, see, I think that's the first thing, is that it depends on if you see penalty kicks as a coin toss or a lottery. And I don't, because we've seen...
Scott does in the longer version of his email mentions that it's kind of coin tossy, is the way he says it.
That's why I would say, like, no, I don't think it would necessarily be better. Because the reality is, right now, I mean, penalty kicks still require a lot of fortitude when you're stepping up to take that kick, because you can get caught in head games a little bit, but it's also, you got to make sure that your mechanics are correct. If you try to overhit, if you try to Panenka it at the wrong time, you're going to get into trouble. So you're still having to make those kind of gamesmanship decisions. And it is also the fact that it's world-class players who should be scoring from that distance.
Right.
Now, maybe that's where you could take issue, is that if you're trying to decide a game based on players doing something they should be doing, then maybe it's not the best scenario.
And that was part of what Scott was saying, is like, let's do something that's harder, gives the goalkeepers more of a chance. So maybe we'll ignore the thing about, is it fair, is it less random? Would it be more fun to watch a player step up from 18 yards, 21 yards, maybe top of the D? Is that 21 yards?
I'm going to flip this on you, though, because I answered already. So you tell me, what do you think?
Well, I'm a fan of novelty, so I'm going to say yes. Okay. I would quite enjoy seeing someone have to try and beat the keeper from, say, 18 yards out, because it is obviously a lot harder.
And that's worth noting.
Where are you picturing it when you see it? I keep picturing it 18 yards on the side of the D at the top of the box. They're taking it like at an angle from the very top of the box.
Oh no, I'm just assuming it's you just walk it back 6 more yards. That's
so
all.
It's where the D,
just in the middle. Yeah, it's exactly where the penalty spot is. Just move six yards.
Okay,
back
all right, let's do that then. Okay,
that would be my guess. Yeah, what? You're putting it at an angle now? Are you saying that they have the option from like anywhere inside the D they can shoot?
Yeah, let's say that.
Okay. I mean that's interesting, but the reality is it's way harder. And I know people would say like,
to beat the keeper from there.
Yeah, because I know people would say, oh well, you still are scoring from 25 yards out on free kicks, and that's with a wall there. So if you got no wall,
I would say that.
But the reality is the keeper can see it then, and if he knows, oh, he's hitting it to my right hand side, I can dive that way. I have a better chance.
So why don't keepers say, no wall for me? I'll face this head on.
Yeah, because I think you know the answer to that. Because and the reality is you're still going to have people standing in your way.
Yeah,
I mean that is one answer amongst others.
And so if it's just 1v1 kicker versus keeper, you think it's harder than you think to score from 18 yards?
I think it's harder than you think, especially because it just becomes, you have to think more. You have to really hit because generally in the penalty kicks, and I think this is where Scott is kind of coming in with the idea that if you hit it to the right hand side of the goalkeeper, for example, to your right, to the goalkeeper's left, if you hit it on the ground or up high, you've got a really good chance of saving it. It's when you hit it in that 3 feet off the ground to 6 feet off the ground range that's where the goalkeeper can save it.
Yeah.
Now, if you're shooting it from six yards further back, you have to work even harder because it really has to be a well-taken, perfectly placed, a lot of bend shot. Otherwise, it's going to be saved.
But I feel like you're saying that like it's a negative. I feel like I agree that it's not that it's easy to score from 12 yards. I have missed from 12 yards.
Yeah.
But the expectation is that you score, right? Once you make it harder, to me, maybe it adds more drama because you're suddenly like, oh, what's this guy like from 18 yards? Like, it's a real challenge to try and beat the keeper from there.
See, I think part of it for me is that it just flips it around. It flips the drama around in the sense that right now the idea is they're going to score, and when they don't, it's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
That's how penalty shootouts work. Is that you more often than not, it's 4-3 or 5-4 or whatever than it is 2-1, unless something has gone horribly wrong. And I think it would just flip around in that when a player scores, it becomes a bigger deal. It's like, ooh, we're 3 rounds in, and and we finally got somebody on the score sheet. Cool? I mean, I think it's only from the novelty standpoint. That it's only like, now it's exciting because he did score and not he missed.
So maybe it would get boring to sit back and watch sort of people keep putting it over the bar or having it saved. Eventually be like, I miss the old days where we used to score all the time.
That's the thing. Because, I mean, and it's worth noting, like, it's a novelty. It could be fun. It could be interesting. Yeah. It probably would be. But there's also a chance that you have you're 8 rounds in and it's 1-1. Mm-hmm. And I mean, maybe it's being decided by skill and it should be taking longer. It's more reflective of the overall game.
Scott also asked us about the chances that this actually happens. And I would say this is a thing where in the 70s and 80s, the NASL, when they did the dribbling shootout, which if you're not familiar, it was from like 35 yards out. They did one-on-one with the keeper. You dribbled one-on-one with the keeper, tried to score that way. That became then sort of I want to say stigmatized as this very like weird American like cheerleadery kind of thing with pom-poms where you are essentially not playing the game the way the rest of the world plays it. So now everybody's scared to break with tradition and do anything but a penalty shootout.
And I would disagree with you on that. I would have disagreed with you on that. Except that I then saw the YouTube comments. And the YouTube comments are never where you want to go to get informed discourse.
They're where you want to go for abuse. That's pretty much it.
But I guess I had this idea in my head that was like a weird NASL experiment in the 70s that no one remembers. And to be fair, not a lot of people do remember. But when people watch that, the reaction seems to be removing the expletives. This is a very stupid idea. This is a dumb American idea. And I guess I didn't really think that it had that sort of resonance and it provoked that sort of reaction. But I think you're right. And I think it's partially that
because it's the only place that did it.
Yeah, and so I think it becomes, even if you try to introduce it now, you would have people saying, well, where did this idea come from? Has anyone ever done this before? Oh, yeah, that defunct league from the 80s, which is now back, maybe. They're the ones who did it, and they did it briefly, and it didn't quite work, and Carlos Alberto missed a lot of his chances. And then it's like, no, I don't think we need that. Let's just stick with what we got.
So taking Scott's free kick idea, right? The only sort of analogous thing I guess we have is this rolling dribbling shootout thing that NASL did. Was that we watched some on YouTube, right? We watched NASL ones and we watched some MLS highlights of when they did that in the early days in the 96, 97. Was that more fun than penalty shootouts?
It was. I think I enjoyed it more. I think the big difference was that we saw some with the Cosmos in like the NASL playoffs.
Yeah,
and we saw
versus the Dips. Washington Dips,
right, with afros and no goalkeeper gloves. Versus even like the early years of the MLS, they did it, of the Major League Soccer. There you go. Sorry MLS fans. I added an article. I know that's blasphemous. But even early MLS teams did this. And you could see the clear difference in talent, I would say, in some of those players.
The MLS players were better at it than the NASL players. Wasn't the Dips Cosmos one we saw, didn't it end 1-0 after five attempts each on goal? Because dribbling straight on at a keeper is really hard. Yeah,
and that's a big part of it, right? Is that a lot of times it was players going straight at the goalkeeper. Some would try to juggle, some would try to go right at him, and then take it like just a touch at the very end. And what you saw was a lot of MLS players realizing, I'll wait for the goalkeeper to go down, I'll chip it over. I'll wait for him to go down, I'll slide underneath him. And so you started to see
Echeverry had that figured out.
He sure did. Shock of all shocks. So you started to see more like 2-1, 3-2.
Yeah.
And I think then it's still decent scoreline. It still has that like in between the 1-0 and the 5-4, and it still has that drama.
Right?
But I think it would be interesting to your question, because I think you do have if you have world class players doing it. If say it did
Neymar versus Manuel Neuer.
Or
one-on-one dribbling.
But then
Come on.
Can you imagine if you got to like say it's Brazil, Portugal in the 2022 World Cup? This is not the players that would be there. I'm going to change this around. Say it's Brazil, Portugal in the 2018 World Cup, and it's like we've implemented this all of a sudden, and we've gotten to the penalty rounds, and it's like Pepe stepping up for Portugal, like Pepe from 35 yards out. Like it would get very interesting to see which players maybe have that secret talent for finishing that you didn't know, and which players you think don't.
But wouldn't that also apply to the Scott's idea of shooting from 18 yards?
Yeah,
you'd find out who could strike one from 18 yards. Right?
I think it would be interesting just because for the first maybe season that it was like in fashion, or first tournament, you would see people missing so often because they're just trying to hit the ball as hard as they could.
But someone would Echeverry it and figure it out, right?
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so. So anyway, I think it's an interesting idea, but I think you're more likely to get like replays before you get penalty shootouts again.
Fair enough.
And even then, I think that's not that likely. But I think you're likely to get more like the ideas of like in extra time you take a player off, or you get 2 more substitutions, or you get weird wrinkles in extra time before you get to penalties.
How about if they did headers and volleys? Where you allowed 2 players, there's a winger and he has to cross it, and your forward has to head it or volley it past the keeper.
Okay, that's interesting.
I like that.
It's like a punt, pass, and kick competition. Yeah. I still think the answer to penalty shootouts is that you start extra time, every 5 minutes everybody has to lose a player. Because I think it makes the most sense, because inevitably, if you keep not scoring, you're going to get to the point where it's your best players are left on the field, so that's going to be interesting. Mm-hmm. But it also, I feel like, has the effect that extra time should, which is that it really runs you out of gas for the next game. And if your best players are on for half an hour and it's 6v6 on a full field, they're going to be dead for the next game.
Yeah, why is that good?
Because then it incentivizes winning in regulation. Because otherwise you can kind of sit back and play for penalties. We've seen teams do that. But if you have to lose a man every 5 minutes or lose a player every 10 minutes, you get into trouble.
All right, let us know. Contact us at TotalSoccerShow.com or on Twitter at Total Soccer Show, or in the YouTube comments. I do notice our YouTube comments, we publish the show on YouTube,
much more civil.
Much more civil, yes. Much nicer than everywhere else. Hello to everybody on YouTube.
Hello. Hello indeed.
Second question today, Taylor, comes from Mike. I think it's Mike Mitchell, but his email just said Mike. He wants to know, what does a player have to do?
It's actually Mike.
What does a player have to do to, quote, develop into a star? I ask because
Daryl and I clearly have such in-depth knowledge when it comes to developing into stars that we have the insight necessary, I'm sure.
As our amateur careers in local soccer attest. I ask because my basic soccer knowledge means that I don't fully understand how a player can have so much potential and then they completely disappear. And one of the examples he mentioned was Freddie Adu, which has become the example of this happening.
So, what do they have to do?
A whole lot is the answer.
Yeah.
Right?
So I think the first question is be very good from the outset, which means working very hard from a very young age. I mean, that's the obvious answer.
But how do you go from being sort of, this 16, 17-year-old is the next big thing, and then say that guy ends up not playing anywhere? And
I think the honest answer is there is no answer. And anyone who tells you that they have the answer is trying to sell you something. Because, I mean, like, for example, I have a buddy whose son is very, very good who went and had trials in England. And they were like, oh, he's amazing.
I know who we're talking about.
He's got great foot skills. He's small. And it's like, that's
there's
it.
So many barriers.
And we know there's players who were not included. I mean, Derek Etienne is an example. Derek Etienne Jr., not really looked at by U.S. scouts because he was too small. And so you can have these players who maybe just kind of fall through the cracks, slip through the cracks. And it doesn't mean that their careers are over by any means. It just means that little arbitrary factors can limit a player from the outset. And so it can be difficult to get over those factors to begin with. So I think it requires almost a kind of very fortuitous series of right circumstances and right steps.
So there's obviously you've got to be talented. Obviously you've got to be like not just assume that you've made it because you're 17 and you get a contract somewhere, right? Then you've got to like work really hard forever to make sure you get sort of into a first team somewhere. And then even if you make it that far, you have reached the promised land. You are a professional soccer player, which is really, there are people who do go all out to do that and don't quite make it.
Right.
Even then, to become a star, then you've got to be better than everybody else. There are so many pitfalls along the way, right? And I'm even thinking of something on the top of my head. You could have done everything right in terms of talent and hard work and everything. You could have a certain style of play, like say you're sort of a Sergio Busquets or Michael Carrick, like passing midfielder, but the team you're contracted to plays like more direct and physical and aggressive. You just don't fit in, and then you could miss 3 or 4 years when you should have been playing first-team soccer. You end up sitting on the bench and not playing first-team soccer, right?
Yeah.
You can just be unlucky, essentially.
Yeah, you can be unlucky, and I think you can also fall victim to the idea that, like, a star is born. Right. And there's this idea that, oh, no, this person was just destined to be a star. Zlatan was always going to be a star. Paul Pogba was always going to be a star.
There's a reality out there where they're not.
Yeah, there's a reality out there where they're not.
Assuming you believe in, like, multiple universes.
The multiverse, absolutely. I do, in fact. But I'll say that maybe Zlatan aside, we're not going to talk about him because he's a freak in a good way. But I mean that, like no player who is Leo Messi, for example, who is at the pinnacle of his career, him and Cristiano Ronaldo are these two amazing players. Neither one of them came into their respective clubs and was like, yep, I'm running the show now. It's all on me. To the point where Ronaldo, I mean, he got destroyed by Sir Alex Ferguson in the first couple seasons. Fans didn't like him. His teammates didn't like him. He had to really rebuild himself and refocus and learn how to be a really successful, productive player in that team.
I watched his debut in a pub in Dublin. I know the exact place where I was when I saw him. Obviously, they paid a lot of money for him. I can't remember exactly how much, but he was about 17, 18, made his debut, had all these step-overs and skills, but it kind of didn't go anywhere.
Did he have the blonde frosted tips?
Yes, he did have the frosted tips. Didn't go anywhere, and you kind of like, oh, like this kid, like maybe he's just all tricks and no end product, right? There's a version where he just becomes that guy, and then he kind of gets dropped later on, then he drops back down the divisions.
Right. And so I think
ends up playing for Sunderland, like Adnan Januzaj.
There you go. And so I think one of the things I would say, and this is more of like to people who want, say we have a 14-year-old listener out there who wants to be a star.
Yeah.
I do think some people buy into the idea that like you become a celebrity to become a star. And that's not how it works, really. Like, you work really hard to show your value, and then maybe you become a celebrity or a famous player. And then if you continue to work really hard and perform at that level, maybe you become a star.
Right.
But we've also both played with people who thought they were stars. And they're sort of like, I'm not doing that. I know my level. I'm a striker. I'm not doing defense. And the reality is you can't do that. That, like, Zlatan may have come in and said, I don't do auditions, but he also worked really hard when the opportunities were there for him to be able to get the opportunities he got.
So I would say to develop into a star, here's what you do. You are blessed with some natural talent.
Yep.
You work really hard to maximize that talent. You be a good professional by sort of not picking up any bad habits or laziness, that kind of stuff. Then you kind of just have to hope for a little bit of luck as well and hope that someone puts faith in you and takes a chance on you. Then you have to take your chance and prove it, and then you just keep going from there.
Yeah.
But you also... I'm actually confused about what I think about this. I always wonder if you're someone who has a legitimate chance of being a really good professional soccer player, do you give it your all, as they say, at the expense of everything else? Or do you kind of have a backup plan? Like, would you, for example, study on the side so maybe you've got some education as well as a fallback? Or is having a fallback an excuse to fall back on it? You know what I'm saying?
I mean, that's the age-old question.
It is, right?
I think it depends on the situation. But I think I would say that you need the other elements out there only because I think you can also have those situations. I forget who it was. There is a famous player who, like, his entire life was just drilling. That his dad had this idea that, like, all you have to do is work and work and work and work and work, and you will become very good. And that can happen, but you can also get burnt out. You can also not be ready to deal with the pressures because all you've done is play soccer your whole life. So then when you get asked a question in an interview and you bomb, that then when the media's like, oh, this guy's an idiot. How do you handle it? Like, so I think you have to have that education. You have to have that background. You have to have other elements. Like, I think Kirk Cousins for the Washington Redskins, he before he was drafted, he met with like I think it was like a mental endurance coach, so he could work on his like ability to think in the game and be on top of his game. So like you have to also look at other aspects that feed into being a good player.
All right, I think we've answered that question then. I want to also pick up on Mike's point about Freddie Adu being the example. I would argue no one has ever been so hyped so soon and for like without any evidence of them actually being a future superstar as Freddie Adu.
Right.
I think it's a one-off. And the reason I think that was a very unique situation is that MLS needed a star. MLS needed a young American star to get everybody hyped. Freddie Adu fit the bill, and so they went all in on it. Right? No, I don't think that'll ever happen again.
I don't think so either. But to my point about how you have to have outside influences, one of the stories I remember when Freddie Adu was first playing for DC was he had dinner with Jaleel White, who you might know as Urkel, because he's one of the few people who's grown up as a child star to be like a normal human.
Yeah.
Like, I think he's not even an actor. I think he's just like a consultant for child stars now. That's what he does. And because he's a normal guy.
It's a smart business move.
And there's an idea there that, like, yeah, you have to kind of learn how to be an adult even as you are surrounded by people who are, you know, taking your picture and asking for your autograph when you're 15.
Like everybody does between the ages of 14 and 18. You have to learn to be an adult.
There it is. Right? So you just have to learn to be a superstar. That's all. That's all it takes.
All right, we're going to take a quick break for a sponsor. Thank you once again, Daryl and Taylor from the past. Great job, guys. You're doing good work there.
Indeed, indeed.
Today's final question comes from Joey Jadlowski. Joey wants to know, actually there's a bit of a preamble to this that I enjoy the dramatic build-up. You ready? Manchester City, Hull City, Stoke City, Leicester City, Swansea City, and more. But only Manchester is referred to as just City. If someone were to say West Ham are playing City this weekend, most people would know that this meant Manchester City. Why is that? Has this always been the case, or has it emerged only recently since City have risen to prominence? Over to you, Taylor.
I will say that I think that I remember City being called City as far back as like when Sven was there and Taksin Shinawatra. And even then, I mean, that was like they had risen to prominence. I can't say I remember City when they were like, really, really struggling, and I think in the lower leagues at one point. So, like, I can't say for sure.
Yeah, League One they were down to. At least.
Yeah, so I would say, though, that as far as I can remember, they've always been City. And I think that probably is because of those cities you mentioned. They tend to be one of the bigger ones.
I think I want to say they're the biggest city. Even when they were down in League One and having to, like, come back late against Gillingham, I believe it was, to, like, not to go back up. They were still the biggest. Like they had 40,000 people at Main Road, right? That's still more than Swansea get right now.
Yeah.
Even when they were struggling, they were still a big team. I would also say it's like you've got Manchester, big city, Manchester United, Manchester City.
Right.
I can't name you another town or city in England where you have two massive teams and one's called City and one's called United.
Yeah, because
you'd think there would be, but there isn't.
That is the difference, right? Because it's not like. You do have two big clubs in Liverpool. You've got Liverpool and Everton, but you don't have like Liverpool Red and Liverpool Blue.
Right.
Like, that would be a little bit different. Then you'd have to kind of factor those two things into the equation. Because you have two big teams in one big city, it makes more sense. I also do think, though, that if you look at like the historic badge of Man City, not the one they changed, I think, this season, they don't really have anything on there that like could serve as a nickname. Whereas, say, Swansea City, they're the Swans. Hull City, they've got the Tiger, they're the Tigers.
Yep.
That's what you kind of tend to get called. Or Stoke City or the Potters.
Yep.
Like you have those other nicknames. City or what? The Citizens or the Blues.
Yeah.
Really, it's City. That's what you end up calling them.
The other thing is, if you live in Leicester, if you live in Swansea, someone locally says to you, who are City playing this weekend? They're talking about the local team.
Yeah,
right?
That's very
It's
true.
more just in national media, and especially over here when we're looking at English teams playing, that's how we refer to City.
You're right. I hadn't even thought about that, because that would be the equivalent of being like, who are the Richmond Kickers playing today, Daryl? And you'd be like,
right.
What? Like, why are you saying that?
What, Taylor Browning Rockwell?
Yeah, exactly. Don't be putting my business out there. People don't know. People don't need to know first, middle, last.
It's out there now. So I think I would say I feel like I can't prove this, but it has always been the case. It isn't only since they became mega rich, because they were big before that, and that's the reason they were worth investing in. They were a big underperforming team.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Anything else on our City confusion here?
I think the only thing I would say is, does that also apply to Manchester United? Because for me, Manchester United is United. I'm a Man United fan, but I have heard people in the past, like, be critical of people who say that, myself included, saying like, "Oh, United are playing." Like, which United? There's a lot of United.
Well, it's all about context, right? Like, if you say, "I know you're talking about Manchester United because you're a Manchester United fan."
Yeah.
If we're in Manchester, I know it's Manchester United because it's United.
But I guess that's my question. Like, similar to what you said, Tottenham's playing City or Spurs are playing City. Like, you would know who that person's talking about, right?
Yeah.
Is it the same as Spurs are playing United?
I think so, because they're the biggest United right now, right? Who's a bigger United?
Right
Newcastle?
now?
No, they're in the Championship.
Yeah, I was going to say right now. In the 70s, maybe Leeds?
Maybe.
Leeds might like a word with you. But yeah. But so I guess, so then it maybe makes sense that it's the two Manchester teams get to have their two endings as or not even endings, but United and City as their kind of relative nicknames.
And for everybody out there who inevitably disagrees with us, the email is contact@totalsoccershow.com, or we're on Twitter @totalsoccershow. But keep our YouTube comments friendly, please.
Yes.
We want to be the one place you can go for friendly YouTube comments. We wanted to talk about the Premier League as well. The Tottenham-Chelsea game is happening right now. We don't know the score. We're going to be back this week. We're going to be talking Premier League, looking back at what's happened over the holidays, talking about some of the best players in the Premier League in recent weeks.
I'm excited to do so.
To close today's show, Taylor, we've got some updates from the Total Soccer Show Scouting Network.
That we do.
Lots of great young players have been doing great things recently. Before we start, one of them is not Cameron Carter-Vickers, unfortunately.
Yeah.
There was a lot of speculation that with Alderweireld and Vertonghen out for Spurs, CCV would finally get his Spurs Premier League debut. He did not. He's not even on the bench. I looked for today's lineup, Spurs v Chelsea. So maybe we just have to slow roll a little bit with CCV and just be a bit more patient. Again, he's an 18-year-old centre-back. That's a tough position when you're a young man to play in the Premier League.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, it is. It's also Tottenham not in a situation where they're like far enough off that Pochettino can gamble and play with like who's going to start back there, and they're not at the top of the table where they can kind of take a few chances because they've got like a 6-point cushion.
Right.
So it's kind of they're really in the heart of it, and they can't risk not being top 4. I feel like so. You're going to have to. He's going to stick with the 2 veteran center backs he's got, and then otherwise he's going to play the people who he knows who can play there, like Eric Dyer, like Wanyama, if need be.
And he's also switched to a back 3 for I think the last couple of games. That's an even tougher situation to throw a young defender into. Okay, so there's your CCV update. What else we got, Taylor, in the Scouting Network today?
We've got an Eric Palmer-Brown update, courtesy of Russell Finley, scouting the 19-year-old defender for FC Porto on loan from Sporting KC.
American, right? Eric Palmer-Brown? Yeah.
You got it. Palmer-Brown has been starting for FC Porto B and has been called into the senior squad on multiple occasions. He's made the bench a couple times.
Okay.
It's starting to look like Porto might buy the youngster outright, and Russell has promised to keep an eye on the developing situation.
Okay. All right. Moving back to England, Gillian Avalon is scouting Jack Storer, the 19-year-old forward for Birmingham. Baby Jack, as Gillian calls him, has been loaned to League 2 side Yeovil, and Gillian thinks it's probably for the best. She's consoling herself in the knowledge that Baby Jack remains with Birmingham in her Football Manager campaign and has become an invaluable player.
She assumes he would do the same for Yeovil Town.
Told you there was a multiverse.
Up next, John C. Fernandez scouting Borja Mayoral. I'm going to guess that's how you pronounce that.
I'm going to say Borja.
Borja?
Yeah.
I can never tell because is he Basque? And aren't all rules off when it comes to the Basque pronunciation? Who knows?
It was Bojan Krčić.
Or was it? Are you sure? Or was it Bojan?
I don't know.
See, now no one knows anymore. 19-year-old forward for Wolfsburg. What started off as a nightmarish season ended with a productive December for the teenage Spaniard. He started and scored for Wolfsburg versus Hertha Berlin. Started against Bayern Munich. Did not score because they lost, I think, 5-0.
Because they're playing Bayern Munich.
Yeah, and got game time against both Eintracht Frankfurt and Borussia Mönchengladbach. The big change in Borja's fortunes came when coach Dieter Hecking was sacked in October and Valerian Ismail took over, changing the team to 3 at the back with a formation that featured 2 strikers, meaning that there's now room for Mayoral to get starting spots alongside Mario Gomez. Julian Draxler was the other striker vying for playing time, and he's just been shipped off to PSG, so things are looking good for Mayoral in 2017.
All right, the Mayoral campaign. Thank you.
Yeah.
Up next, Guy Jedwab is scouting Serge Gnabry, the 21-year-old midfielder / attacker, I want to say, for Werder Bremen for now.
Yep.
Guy is dealing with the ramifications of transfer window silly season. Metro, this is the newspaper they give away on the Underground, reports that Gnabry is available for £6.8 million, mostly in order to keep up the rumours that he might return to Arsenal. That does move papers on the Underground. In addition, Guy saw multiple reports that Gnabry was being looked at by Lazio, with Gazzetta dello Sport as the primary source. However, the article actually said that if Keita were to leave the club, Gnabry would be an ideal replacement. Yeah. So basically, he's young and good, and lots of clubs want him.
And it's also a good reminder that that's how silly season works, that one kind of op-ed in the middle of an article about and this guy would be good if they were to sell him. So there are options becomes they're definitely linked with him. This is going to happen.
Speaking of, what about those Gedeon Zelalem from Arsenal to Borussia Dortmund rumours?
Okay.
Because I've got to admit, I was quite excited
I know you were. You had a whole theory about it.
You poo-pooed it on the Goalmouth podcast.
I sure did.
Right?
Which,
by the way, is our other podcast that's released every morning at 7 a.m.
Right.
Taylor's episode will be out tomorrow morning.
There we are. And I poo-pooed it because I was covering for you because you had covered for me. I was making fun of it a little bit just because it was an ESPN report citing sources, which is always, you wonder.
Yeah.
And then, it seemed like a big part of their argument was that Dortmund were very familiar with Gedeon Zelalem because he played for German youth teams 4 years ago, and because Christian Pulisic plays for Dortmund, and both of them are American now. So it seemed like a very tenuous, here is some evidence that, as I said in Goalmouth, I feel like an editor somewhere was like, you know what, that's enough. Just run with it. We're good. We don't need any more than that.
But part of me thinks, they're citing unnamed sources, which means there may actually be someone at the club who said, we're looking at Gedeon Zelalem. He's available for a Bosman. I think his contract expires in the summer, so he can, as of January 1st, he can negotiate a new contract with a different team. So it may be that there are unnamed sources, but then there's just a paragraph of filler of why this might happen. That's not their sole reason for thinking it might happen.
It's weird. I don't see any straw in here, but I can see you grasping. So there you go.
And my theory was Julian Weigl is a very popular man, right? The young passing midfielder for Dortmund. If he is snapped up by Real Madrid, Zelalem may be a cheap and good replacement. It's the kind of player Dortmund would bring in. Basically, I want it to happen, Taylor. Stop squashing my dreams.
I apologize. Then we'll move on to our final report, which comes from Brett Walker scouting Tom Davies, the 18-year-old midfielder for Everton and the captain of England's U19s. Davies finally got more first-team experience over the holidays. He played 23 minutes against Leicester City on Boxing Day, 25 minutes against Hull City on December 30th, and started against Southampton on January 2nd.
Which gives you an idea of just how crazy the Christmas schedule is in England.
It really does. He managed an assist for Romelu Lukaku to ensure a 3-0 victory. So it looks like Davies has earned a first-team role for the time being, especially since Idrissa Gueye, I'm going to guess is how you pronounce that, or Guy, who knows? Arguably Everton's most important player this season.
He probably does.
Yeah, he might, as will most people who have kept an eye on Everton in the Premier League season. He is leaving for the African Cup of Nations, so it seems like there will be more opportunities for young Tom Davies.
Not bad, young Tom Davies. Not bad for a young 18-year-old to be getting first 10 minutes at Everton.
That's how you play yourself into stardom right there.
Yes, it is. We have many more scouting reports. There'll be more tomorrow, and I can tell you an advanced preview. A lot of Americans will be featured. McKinn's Gaines, Junior Flores, Josh Sargent, and Jackson Ewell. We have scouting reports on all those exciting young Americans to come.
And speaking of situations in which lots of Americans will be featuring, Tennessee. You're going to be seeing some Americans.
Yes, so Chattanooga will be hosting the second winter friendly. So it's Serbia is first, right? The US plays Serbia after January camp. And we sort of thought maybe it was going to end up being Canada because they couldn't find anyone else. Turns out Jamaica. That's much more exciting. Jamaica, with all respect to Canada, Jamaica are a much better soccer team.
Yes. I think so. Yeah.
So in early February, the US will play Jamaica in Chattanooga.
Yeah, I'll take Jamaica and Serbia's B/C team. That's better than Iceland's B/C team in Canada.
It's a workout, right? It's a workout. Yeah.
I'm all right with it. And I think, and no disrespect to Canada, but it's like Jamaica are a tougher opposition. It might mean a little bit more to them than I think Canada's B team when they're trying to find their footing. I think Jamaica, it might be an opportunity to kind of like prove something, get a result when it's been an unsuccessful 2016 season.
Oh, right, because they didn't make the Hex, right? Yeah, when they kind of expected they should.
Yep.
Hey, all right. Also worth mentioning, when I remember there were rumblings that there was about to be a Chattanooga announcement.
Yeah.
And some of the things I saw on Twitter were... they're about to be announced as, because they have an NPSL team, they'll be announced as an NASL team. And we thought this would be part of US Soccer finally saying, here's the division alignments for 2017. Not so much. We are still waiting for US Soccer to announce who is Division 2, who is Division 3. Will NASL be around in 2017? Will the New York Cosmos be around in 2017? Lots of questions hanging in the air. The latest rumour is that it's going to be out later this week, but I put no stock in it at this point because we were told 7 to 10 days in like mid-December.
We were. I'm refreshing our soccer right now, or our MLS right now. I've got no news on the roster as of yet, nor on the NASL, USAL.
But
USL announcement, excuse me.
Those things will happen this week, and we will have a show about them when those things happen this week.
Okay, sounds like a plan. I do have Premier League updates if you want them.
No, thank you.
Okay.
I'm DVRing that game.
All right, then you definitely won't want to know that it's ended 5-5. It has not ended 5-5.
Thank you to everybody for the scouting reports. If you would like to support the Total Soccer Show, join the TSS Scouting Network. You can do so at totalsoccershow.com/subscribe. If you would like to support us by buying a TSS t-shirt or a TSS scarf, you can do so at totalsoccershow.com/shop. It seems like many people bought Christmas presents over the holidays, scarves and t-shirts. They look great when we see people with those photos.
They do, and they were very nice to see, but I have to say, I'm now realizing, well played, US Soccer, well played, because of course they're not going to announce the roster while we're recording. They've got to wait until we've edited and are about to upload the show, then they can announce the roster.
When one of us has already left the building.
Exactly. Exactly. Then the phone can blow up with people saying, emergency podcast, and we can both feel like slackers for not putting one out. There we are.
All right, Taylor, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Right back at you, buddy.
Listeners, thank you for listening. We always appreciate it. We will be back tomorrow talking maybe Premier League, maybe US Soccer, maybe USL and NASL. We'll see what happens. Until then, it's goodbye from us.